Hi, welcome back. Today's Tip Tuesday. Today we are going to be discussing 3 important things you should keep in mind, practice, however you want to say it, when you're dealing with a tenant. One of the biggest mistakes we see when somebody decides to rent their property to a tenant, they end up becoming friends with the tenant, which is okay. But this is a business transaction and you really need to keep it on a business level. So number one, because of COVID, the rental restrictions, all the things that are going on, everything's changing all the time. We recommend that you always seek legal advice before taking action on a tenant. Very important. Number two, make sure all your notices are in writing. Don't do anything verbal. And you also need to be aware, and that goes back to point number one about seeking legal advice, is that there's certain verbiage that is required in certain notices that you serve. It would be a real bummer if you served a 60-day notice and then ended up having to serve another 60-day notice because you served the wrong notice or an incomplete notice. So always make sure you do it in writing and seek legal advice before you serve that notice. Number three, I see this often. Landlords will not charge market rent to their tenant. So this can affect you in a couple different ways. When you're getting ready to sell that property, your tenant is going to have sticker shock. If you've been renting to the tenant, let's say for $1,200 a month, and market rent for that property is $2,000, when they try to go find another property, they're not going to be able to locate anything comparable. And then what ends up happening is they become disgruntaled because they feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. They don't realize that you've been giving them a break on the rent the whole time they've lived there. So you're not doing your tenant a favor by not charging market rent. And the second point to that is if you're getting ready to sell, an investor ends up purchasing that property, and let's say the tenant wants to stay and they want to keep the tenant. If you're really low rent, that could affect the loan, and it also could affect how the investor values that property. If the investor is looking at a high rate of return, because of the rent restrictions that we have, it might take that investor 5 years to be able to get that property up to fair market value. So that's another reason to make sure that you charge your tenants market rent. Hopefully this was very insightful, because that's what we're here for, is to incite, empower, and educate. I thank you for tuning in. If you like what you see, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and also the subscribe button and the bell notification so you can be notified, because we post these every Tuesday. Thanks again.